Welcome to Life After, a podcast for women to take you from feeling like you're just surviving to thriving, to creating a life you really love. Expect to discover tips and tricks to get there. Each episode will have actionable steps to empower you to make changes. I started this podcast because I've been through it all, from getting out of a marriage with a narcissist to completely rebuilding my life. And now I'm on a mission to help you too. You can change your life. It's absolutely possible. In this episode, we are so fortunate to have Molly Mandelberg as my special guest. Molly is the founder of Wild Hearts Rise Up. She's an artist, a best-selling author, a world traveler. She has 2 podcasts and is a very down-to-earth business magician. She loves helping her clients to systematize their work, overcome their inner critic, and master the magnetics of marketing so they can have more freedom and make an even bigger difference. She is also a licensed psilocybin facilitator in Oregon and loves supporting her journey clients to unlock the subconscious patterns that have kept them from thriving. Molly's wisdom is both profound and beautifully insightful. Her openness and vulnerability offer valuable guidance that will help you navigate healing after leaving a narcissistic relationship. I know you are going to love this episode. Hello, everybody. It is my absolute pleasure today to have Molly Mandelberg join us on this week's episode of Life After, From Surviving to Thriving. Molly is an absolute inspiration in the work that she does and her healing journey, and I'm so thrilled to have her join us. Molly, can you start out by just sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you, Jill. You're one of my favorite people.
Thank you.
I am I work with entrepreneurs, and I'll say I don't usually call myself a business coach. I've recently found the term business wayfinder, which I like quite a lot, but I mostly work with mystical, magical, spiritual, in tuned, big mission, world changing kind of people. And I help them to systemize their brilliance so that they can reach more people with their magic and also to get out of their own way because often we have some limiting beliefs or things that are keeping us stuck from actually creating something new or from choosing greater in our lives and in our businesses. So that's sort of my day job. And yeah, I will say I have a deep connection to the message of this show, this podcast. I grew up with, and I don't use the term narcissist lightly, but I grew up with a pretty vicious, emotionally abusive narcissist stepfather. And the reason that I have been able to create the business and the life that I have created was because of my choice to heal from that. And so I'm very glad to be a part of sharing that message here today with Jill.
Well, we appreciate that very much. And in part, it's because for the audience out there, you may very well be in a position where you have been in a relationship, particularly when you were young, where you may just feel bad about the relationship you've been in. And you might not understand why. You might even think it's your fault. And as you develop and mature and grow and learn, and I think, Molly, in your case, where you got away from him, you start to really reflect and realize maybe this wasn't so much me. And even if you go through that process, or when you go through that process, there's still a whole lot of healing that needs to be done and a whole lot of recovery that comes from having that specific relationship in your life and also not repeating those relationships. So tell us a little bit about, let's start with what are some of the things that you did? Let's start first and foremost with how did you come to realize that you'd been in a relationship like that, particularly with a step parent?
Yeah, so it was insidious. I will say that.
Mm.
My mom married my stepdad when I was about 6 years old. And I definitely had a knowing, even as a 6 year old, which maybe speaks to how spunky I was back then, but that this was going to be bad for us. That I knew, even though she was wooed and she was, they jumped into getting married pretty quickly because they had been in love in high school. They were high school sweethearts. But I remember asking her not to. And my brother apparently independently had asked her not to marry him as well. But we knew it was going to be bad. And it's insidious when you're a child, you don't realize that that's not normal or it's not okay, or the way that it's sort of reprogramming you to believe the lies that they're telling you of you're not good enough or you're wrong, you're bad. But those stories got very ingrained in me. And it wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I finally started acknowledging I had a wiring system that was not supporting the life I wanted to be living, which was one of more joy, of real connection, of thriving, like professional life and career. I had kind of spent many years uh, hiding or running, and
Mm.
also abusing substances to, numb the pain of feeling like I wasn't good enough to be in the world. And I think what you said about repeating those relationships is really true, especially if you had someone like that in your childhood. We often are trying to understand what happened in a relationship that caused us harm. And so we seek out some version of that same relationship to understand it better. And that's why I think people who end up in bad relationships or with partners who are not supportive in some way, or who are harmful in some way, that we tend to repeat that cycle because we're looking for an understanding of why is it like this or how can I change it. And it's not until we really fully acknowledge that pattern that we're able to hopefully break our way out of it. But it takes a lot of support and it takes a lot of choice to do such a thing.
It absolutely does. And we're familiar with the pattern. So if we, before we have that awareness that it is a relationship that we don't want to repeat, it's just the familiarness of it. It feels, even if it's unhealthy or abusive, it feels comfortable.
It
It
feels like home.
feels what
Yeah.
we're used to. That um, the the heightened sense that our nervous system gets. That's what we're used to being in. And so it's not bad or wrong. It's not intended to shame anybody out there that's in that position. It's to help you come to that awareness to say, oh, feeling this way, starting to take those steps to listen to, relearn that inner voice that's saying to you, this doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah.
And start asking those questions to to open the door to that reflection, to figure out why, to do exactly what you just said, which is then start really asking the questions, what's happening here, so we can start that process of moving through a healing process instead of just repeating that pattern again and
Yeah.
again and again.
Yeah. Which is going to come with discomfort, of course, because the comfort
Absolutely.
is the toxic state. It's going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable to get out of that pattern, that programming, or even that relationship that may be really hard to leave.
I just recently was talking to a friend, and she mentioned to me she'd heard from somewhere, and I'm sorry I can't quote the source properly at the moment, but you can't be comfortable and in growth mode at the same time.
Hmm.
Like they're just not, they're kind of mutually exclusive from each other,
Yeah.
right? And so getting used to having that level of discomfort as you grow ultimately is a good thing,
Yeah.
because you're moving away from something that is ultimately going to hurt you again and again and again.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that I really want to come back to the abusing substances piece,
Hmm.
and as much as you're willing to share around that, because I think that what happens is it's not so much the substance, it's the abusing part. right? We often, whether it's food or shopping or alcohol or drugs, whatever it is, when we aren't in alignment with ourselves or are authentic to how our body, our body is often leading the way, even when we're ignoring it.
Mhm.
We are finding that unhealthy coping mechanism that's trying to drive us to do something differently. And when we're denying and ignoring and trying to, pacify, we find a substance to abuse.
Yeah.
Again, it can be anything. So tell us a little bit about that, how that played a part in your process of deciding how you needed to make change in your life.
I mean, my journey of we got rid of my stepdad when I was about 14, and I would say that's about the first time that I got drunk. I didn't drink real heavily until college a few years later, but I was very uncomfortable because that story had been implanted in me, let's say, that I was not good enough, that I was bad or wrong or unworthy or didn't know anything or blah, 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 whatever the story had been, that it was so uncomfortable to be me in the world. It was so
Mm.
uncomfortable to just be like a human connecting with other humans, like vulnerable, that I learned how to mask. And when I found uh, how what do you want to say, ecstatically I could mask with drugs and alcohol, I just sort of went headfirst in that direction. And it was a way of hiding, but it was also a way of being in connection with other people
Mm,
without actually being my vulnerable true self. And
sure.
so it made it easier to have conversations or be in a social setting or have friends if it was always based around uh, getting fucked up, basically. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I started realizing that A, I have been running for a long time from this discomfort that I'm aware is in there. And B, I'm tired of the party. I'm tired of being that messed up all the time. And I actually had, some turning point moments in my life where I realized I could heal that stuff. I could change my life and that it might be more fulfilling. And so why not give that a shot? And so I
Mm,
started going down this rabbit hole of uh, evolution, personal growth, self healing. I got certified as a hypnotherapist. I started seeing clients doing that. That was a huge reality check of like, oh, I'm going to show up in this world as someone who can help other people. That's bold as hell. That's me actually saying that not only do I know stuff, but I can help you with that stuff.
right.
And so that was really forced me to walk my talk and do the healing work that I needed to do. And that was the beginning of like a long trajectory of setting aside the party animal version of me and choosing this new up level. And that was over a decade ago. But the the tricky part was it didn't necessarily trickle into my personal life and relationships that fast. It was like who I was being and how I saw myself was able to change, but what I was willing to be met with in partnership had not changed yet. It
Okay.
hadn't changed or evolved. And so, like I said, that pattern of still want to understand what that was or how that went. I got into a relationship where he told me, I think, three different ways that he was probably a narcissist.
Mm,
And I, for some reason, just like blacked that out and was like, I don't care. I want to do this anyway.
right.
And then it took almost a full year of being together for me to finally acknowledge that it was narcissism, that it was gaslighting, that it was causing me cyclical damage over and over and over. And that if I stayed, it was only going to continue. And I tried everything I could to change it. But with that kind of pattern, with that particular kind of person, that change isn't actually possible. And to stay hoping it'll get better was going to cause damage. And so I had to, once I had fully actually acknowledged that and remembered the times he had told me, basically flat out, yes, I am probably a narcissist,
Right.
that I finally was able to get the hell out of there.
Well, I think it's really valuable that you share that story, and thank you for doing so. That it's vulnerable to do that, and I appreciate your willingness to share. And I would add that we sometimes need to practice changing that pattern,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes we don't have the capacity or ability to just, it's not a light switch, right? Sometimes we have to, our learning curve takes time and energy. And so for myself, what I found was that in successive relationships, I got a little bit better at, and whether it was a dating relationship or a relationship at work or another professional relationship in the community, that each narcissist I came across, I got better at spotting them quicker and better at at responding to the narcissistic traits and better at extricating myself in a way that caused me less harm. So sometimes we just, and sometimes the way a narcissist will show up in your life is a little bit different than the last one.
Mhm.
And there are so many factors. This was a partner for you, so that's going to look a little differently. So just so everybody knows out there, there are so many factors that can play into how that pattern shows up in your life and how much time and practice it can take to successfully move through getting out of a relationship that might not be healthy for you. And that's okay.
Yeah, acknowledging it in the first place is like a huge mountain to climb, because as soon as you actually fully say, okay, yes, this might be what's going on here, you're now faced with like a whole new future you might have to choose. And
Right.
to sort of ignore it or to pretend, no, it's not that bad, like even just acknowledging it in the first place is a giant leap. And yeah, I had this awareness a few days ago, which must have been because we were going to have this call, but what I got this hit that the self I am now is like shouting back at her to go, that
Right.
there's something better after.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
if you could know that so fully in the moment, it would make that leap of claiming it, make that leap of leaving it, make that leap of rebuilding after. If you could know that a couple years from now, your life would be so much more amazing,
Yes. And
you would choose that more easily. But it's the unknown that we sort of,
it is.
yeah,
And to have someone in your life that can help you in that stage where you aren't feeling that, can't feel that, to see that for you, to help you see that yourself,
yeah,
because it does get better. And there is a moment, and whether it's truly a moment or it's 6 weeks or 6 months or, God, unfortunately sometimes it's 6 years, um, where you cannot see the forest through the trees.
yeah,
And one of the things that you have taught me so beautifully is to ask those questions. What else is possible,
yeah,
right? What else is possible here?
yeah,
How else can my life look? And to just even be asking those questions or having somebody else pose the possibility of what your life can look like can open doors for you that will allow you to stop running,
yeah.
to stop running long enough to think to yourself, I got to do something differently, right?
Something needs to change. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to really point out, I am so grateful that I left before it even hit the year mark. My mom was with my stepdad for 9 years, and
Yeah.
like that caused a lot on all of us. But that was only possible for me because I had, in those many years of being an entrepreneur and healing work and learning modalities and being in community with other healers and practitioners, I was leaning so heavily on people I trusted to be a neutral source, that when I was like, am I crazy? Like something's not fucking right here.
Right.
That I was reaching out to my friend who was an energy practitioner, emotional intelligence coach, my friend who is a therapist who was willing to just talk to me, my friend who is access consciousness facilitator who could invite me to ask the questions I really needed to be asking, not to give me their opinion on whether or not I should go, but to really hold space for me to be in those questions.
Yes.
Because a friend, like my best friend, who I absolutely adore, she's going to give me her opinion. And I couldn't take that at the time. I couldn't
Right.
take somebody else being like, you deserve better. This isn't right. I needed somebody to be like, what do you know?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that we require support to do that, especially when our like frontal lobe or amygdala or whatever part of our brain is so compromised by being in flight, fight, or flight. Our nervous system is like so out of whack when we're
Yes.
in that situation that we don't have access to our full capacity of thought.
That's right. And if particularly if we're early in that process, or if it's one of our early relationships, we don't have the practice to be able, we need someone to help us hold that space. We need someone to remind us what it is to listen to our inner voice, to tap back into what our body is telling us, right? Our body is constantly, I've told this story a few times, but my back used to go out about every 8 or 10 months when I was married, just like clockwork. 8 to 10 months, my back would go out. I'd be flat on my back in bed for 3 or 4 days. I'd have to go to the doctor, take meds. Anybody that knows me, I don't take meds for almost anything, right? I will grit my teeth through the pain, no sweat. About every 8 to 10 months, had to be on meds. About 18 months after my ex and I split up, I went, my back hasn't hurt at all in 18 months, right? I missed 2 cycles because my body was screaming at me, you have to do something different.
Yeah.
But if we don't know that, if we don't know that our body is telling us, giving us clues all the time, constantly talking to us, we have to learn that somewhere. And we
Yeah.
need someone in our lives that is objective and clear and has the knowing themselves to share that with us
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and
and to
I
give
I
us the
really
space and
appreciate that
time.
about you too, Jill, is that you're not going to take any call from any person and say, "Oh, you're definitely with a narcissist." Like your whole message in my eyes is that inquiry of, is this true? And if it is, what kind of support do you need to actually change your life now? And I'll say to the symptoms thing, like my body was screaming the whole time to get the
Mm,
hell out of there. The same way my 6-year-old body knew this isn't going to go well for us. My adult body knew I was losing my hair. I was like, yeah, having digestive issues, like so many things where my body was like, something's not right. This
right.
isn't okay. Like something needs to be different. Get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what's wrong. It's like,
Right.
okay.
Yeah. And sometimes we just need some space and grace. And one of the things to really keep in mind that is so critical in this process, so critical, and is one of the biggest red flags that people don't think about, is if the person that you're with, whether it doesn't matter if it's a boss or a neighbor or a friend or a partner, if they won't give you space, that's a huge red flag because they don't want you to have time to let your nervous system calm down. They don't want you to have any peace or calm, right? So just kind of keep that in mind if you're ever in a situation where you're like, why can't I get a break? I just need a break, right? I need a break. And it doesn't even have to be I need a break from this person. It's just if you are feeling like I need a break, it's time to really be thinking about why. Really start the inquiry of why why am I feeling that way? And it might help you get some clarity on how the people or a person in your life is impacting you.
Yeah.
So, all right, I want to shift gears a little bit because this podcast is all about solutions
Mm.
and really helping people understand what they can do, right? It's so easy to be stuck and feel like I can't do anything. What can I do? And, one of the things that you said to me is about having awareness and choice, right? And talking about that acknowledgement piece. So tell me, you went through a period of time where you made so much change and so much growth in your professional life. When you were ready to make those changes in your personal life, what kinds of things did you do to see those shifts?
Yeah. I want to start with the awareness piece. And I want to say, like, even as I was leaving my ex, who it was very hard to leave because, yeah, that I want space thing. Like, he was majoring in psychology. And so he had all the right things to say.
Yeah,
Like, he
of
knew
course he was.
exactly what to say to sound like he had my back or it was emotionally involved. It was very confusing to me, even as a very intelligent person, that it got very confusing. But the saving grace, like the master hack, the thing I think really saved my life was that I journal every day and I would write about what was going on. And because I was journaling, I was able to see the pattern that every time it gets good, we crash. Every
Okay.
time it starts to be happy, he throws a wrench in it. And it's always something surprising. It always pulls a rug out from under me. And suddenly we're back at, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. And then we build back up to joy. And it was like, without me having that written down, objectively, just like, and here's what we're dealing with today. And here's what happened. And here's how I felt about it. And me trying to just process my emotions to be in a good state of mind for the day. I was able to like go back and like almost earmark the pages of like, look, that was 3 weeks, that was about 4 weeks. Like the cycle of it was easy to see. So that awareness piece was more accessible because I had that practice. And when it comes to go back to your point, my capacity to change my life has mostly come down to my willingness to journal, to question my thoughts, to write down what I believe, to ask for what I'm wanting more of, to sort of game plan or hype man myself to believing I could have that, and to like name and process any limiting beliefs I was aware of in the moment that said I couldn't have it. And
Okay.
lots of gratitude, acknowledging what was going right so that I could train my brain to be focused on that.
Lots of gratitude. Gratitude is definitely a big one. Um, that was, I'm taking notes. That was amazing. When you talk about, I just want to, I want to go back when you talk about the cycle, and I want to be really clear that being in a relationship with a narcissist, with any kind of narcissist, is abuse. Is put exactly as you've described it. It is a cycle. It is the cycle of abuse. And so I just want to remind everyone that it's a cycle that will never end unless one or both of the parties takes specific action for it to end. Now, in a lot of cases, that means leaving, which Molly, you did successfully. And sometimes that takes time, and sometimes that takes strategy. Often it takes time and strategy to figure out how you're going to do that.
And support.
So just keep in mind that these are, if you are in this situation, to add that to the part of the awareness that you may need to come to. And I understand that that can be really scary and it can feel really, really hard to accept. And know that it is a cycle that doesn't end.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why having people in your life that can support you and that can give you space are so incredibly important.
Yeah, having
So
support
that,
is a really huge thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's
And it
the PSA for the
yeah,
episode.
and it was that one friend asking, okay, so if this is a cycle that keeps continuing, do you want to give it 1 year of your life? Do you want to give it 6 years of your life? Do you want to give it 9 years of your life and maybe end up having his kids and being tied to him forever?
Yeah,
And I was like, oh, no.
yeah,
If we're talking about years of my life spent on this, no. I don't
yes,
want to give him more years of my life doing
yes.
this loop de loo.
And let me just add, when you have kids, then you are not only trying to extricate yourself and relearn patterns for yourself, you're trying to save your children as well.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from experience that that is challenging. That adds a whole nother layer. And in order to do that in a way that really helps your children, it just adds so much more sacrifice to be
Yeah.
able to do that.
Yeah. And then, hopefully you're an aware enough parent to resource them so that they don't have to go find those relationships again to understand what happened to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So you gave so many tips. The writing, I think, is so valuable, the journaling, because especially if you don't have access or you feel like you're not ready to talk about it, because the writing allows you to process in a way that's safe.
I want to add one more thing to that also, which is I am a studier. When I started thinking this might be what I thought it was, I was going deep into books like Passive Aggressive Covert Narcissism. What are the signs? What are the things? Googling, what are the common phrases used by narcissists in gaslighting? And what are the mechanics of gaslighting? I was starting to look really deep into what is this exactly and how can I be sure that this is what I'm experiencing. So highly recommend going to Jill's website, locatecoaching.com, and
Yes.
finding the free gift there that will help you determine whether you're with a narcissist or not. But life hack wise, my journaling practice was my inquiry, it was my magic, it was my self-processing and my up-leveling, but I was also voraciously studying and seeking modalities or tools or mentors or support systems that would create the life, more of the life I wanted to be living. And that's the only reason that I'm here in what I would call a thriving state of being right now, in a relationship that is healthier than I ever imagined possible for me, and in a home that feels like really yummy and good to be in. That is only here because I was willing to ask what it would take to get here and lean into the tools that would help transform me and my life, including the mentors and support and guidance that's out there.
Yes.
So look for your team. Look for your team and find them.
Absolutely. And there are so many resources available. So I love books. Everybody knows I love books. If you're not if you don't love books, there's YouTube. There's, again, absolutely go to my website. My free gift is fantastic for answering those top 5 questions that'll help you get clarity. Um, there's podcasts. This podcast regularly, my podcast regularly has narcissist specific episodes to help you gain some additional knowledge on different pieces of what happens. And when you are in the beginning of this process, sometimes it takes baby steps, and that's okay. Sometimes we just need to take the baby steps, and so it's okay when you need to do that. And Molly, that's really what you did in the beginning, the journaling, the gratitude, the asking for what you want more of. What would it take? What the possibilities question. And I want to touch on this one specifically because I think you'll have a really great answer for this. You mentioned a practice in challenging your limiting beliefs. Can you tell us a little more about that one?
Yeah, the again, it's awareness and then it's choice. The hardest part is acknowledging that that's a limiting belief, not a truth about me. So that the old story was I don't know enough. I don't know enough to do that. I don't know enough to help people. I don't know enough, blah, blah, blah. I had to actually acknowledge that is not a truth. That's not an absolute truth. I know a lot of things in a lot of different areas, and I'm really good at learning new things. I'm like an information like fiend. I had to get real with noticing that my inner monologue had been like shouting out, yo, you don't know enough. And I had to be like, hang on, I hear that and I need to question that now. So again, it's the awareness of noticing what is the story? What do you say about yourself? What are you like telling other people about you? Or how are you discounting yourself in some way? That's going to be the beginning of starting to even be able to notice that there are limiting beliefs in there. And it's usually the things you've been maybe even joking about, saying about yourself, discrediting yourself in some way, to others or just to yourself. That's going to be the place to start.
And I want to add to that. Thank you. I think that's a fantastic answer. I want to add to that. We talk a lot about in the podcast and in my work, what you tell your brain is what your brain believes.
Yeah.
And you have to be very, very careful about the messages, not only that you're telling yourself, but that you externally allow in.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just say that when you have a limiting belief or a message that you're telling yourself, we often think that that's ourselves, that it's our message, that it's somehow a part of us that believes that thing. But if we take a little time to really reflect on it and really think about it, it didn't generate with us. It generated at some point earlier in our lives, and we took it to be the truth.
Right.
And then we just repeated it. And one of the things I found that as soon as we acknowledge that that whatever that original statement or belief wasn't ours, it becomes much easier to reject it in the future.
Yeah.
Well, someone told me that I couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
When we reframe it in that way, it allows us to say, well, I don't have to believe that then.
I don't choose that for me anymore.
I
Yeah.
don't have to
I've been
choose
living
that.
as if that's true, and that hasn't worked for me. So how about I try living without that being true?
Yep. And I didn't
Yeah.
really like that person. So why would I take on what they believed about me? Or that person told me that when I was 6 or 10 or 8, and that's not who I am anymore. So it's just one little trick to reframe it, to reflect and recognize and reframe, oh, that's not my voice. So I can
Yeah.
let it go. I can just simply let it go. It doesn't have to be my belief because it wasn't my belief to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. Just think, did you come in as an infant thinking that was true or knowing that was true about you? If not, then it's completely optional to keep it around.
Yeah.
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 And not only that, I don't think you really have to. It's helpful if you can go back to the root cause and remember the moment that somebody said that to you. But it's also helpful to just be able to say, I notice as the observer that there's a thought pattern running around in here and that it's disempowering. And one of the sort of hacks is just asking yourself, do I want to be the person who believes that? No. Okay, what's the opposite? What would I like to believe instead? Another tool is look for evidence that it's a lie. Like for me, thinking I don't know enough. Well, look at all the things I do know and look at all the people who turn to me for support and advice and look at all the places where I've shown up with the information. Like there are so many places I can point to where that isn't true. That's not actually true about me. So that sort of like takes the wind out of the sails of that one as a belief inside of me. And that can be true for anything, that you're not good enough or that you're not pretty enough or that you're not smart enough or that you don't have enough time. Like there are so many things that we have been using to throttle ourselves that we get to question and look for evidence to the contrary of.
Absolutely. I moved to LA in my mid-20s, and it became so apparent so quickly that I could at any moment just be anywhere and turn my head and find someone that was prettier, thinner, richer, smarter. And so that comparison became, for the most part, became unnecessary, because if you are comparing yourself to everyone all the time, right, you start to recognize it takes the power out of it. And so considering it in that way, that we are who we are, our uniqueness is what makes us beautiful and worthy, and we don't need to worry about what anyone else is doing. I love that quote, don't compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. And so many of the messages we get, particularly if you're in a relationship with someone who is intentionally trying to make you feel bad about yourself, running that internal dialogue for yourself. Is it true? No, it's not true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what are
Yeah.
you excited about right now? What are you doing professionally and personally that you're excited about right now?
Yeah, I'm excited about, lots of things. Two big things right now that I'm excited about. I've been spending, for those of you who don't know me, which is probably most of the people listening to this show, I have spent the last 15 years, or I had spent 15 years being nomadic, traveling all over the world. At first, like I said, it was running from things and partying all over the world. And then after I started my business, it really was about running towards things. 6 years of that was doing van life. And as I was doing that, I was always dreaming into having land someday and building dwellings and having a retreat center and some space to have gatherings or yoga classes or something. I was just imagining this homestead with a community aspect to it. And I ended up falling in love with a wonderful man who lived on 5.5 acres, lives. He had the opportunity to buy that land last year, which he did. And now we are in the where do we want to put the first dwelling and where do we want to put the sauna? And we're in that conversation right now. So, yeah, I'm very excited about this building project that after being on the road for so long, I'm finally actually doing this homestead, putting down roots, learning how to sprout plants and stuff game, which is very fun. And on another
Congratulations.
side of that, after 10 years of doing all kinds of modalities, but mostly business strategies for emerging conscious leaders and entrepreneurs. I've added a whole nother modality of doing psilocybin facilitation in the state of Oregon. It's legal journey work, and getting to sort of partner with this plant deva spirit consciousness that has the capacity to really transform people's perspective and life. And I've been doing those in-person journeys in a beautiful service center in Ashland, Oregon, which is about a little less than an hour from where we live down here in Southern Oregon. But yeah, it's been a really amazing way of returning to in-office transformational healing work when that's really how my business got started, and still running my coaching business online and remotely, which I absolutely love. But it's been really fun to get to do this healing work in person as well.
Congratulations on the house. That's exciting. And
Thank you.
being able to build that part of your dream,
Yeah.
really wonderful. And in terms of the psilocybin, how how does that work allow you to help people that have experienced trauma? Because obviously, someone, any of my audience members who have been in a relationship with a narcissist have a front row seat to having
Yeah.
lived a life of with some form of trauma.
Yeah, I will say psychedelics have absolutely been a key component in my own healing journey of recovering from the trauma that I've gone through. It is really useful in broadening our scope of what we can see or what we can acknowledge or what we can look at, and oftentimes finding a deeper truth. So if something traumatic happened and we came up with the I'm not good enough story and we've been living as if that's true, oftentimes psilocybin or medicine journey work will let us rise up above that same experience and look down and see, oh, I was actually more than enough in that moment. And it was something else that sort of made me believe I wasn't, and allows us to take that new truth and really feel it like in an embodied experiential way, the deeper truth of you are enough, you are beautiful, you are love, you are magic, you are deserving. And not everybody has the blissful experience of it. Some people are experiencing the challenge of it before they can come to the lesson of it. It can be uncomfortable or it can be ecstatic, but even the people who have a challenging journey experience, oftentimes 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year later, reflect on that challenging awareness as something that did catalyze a greater life for them moving forward. And I think that's exactly why it has been legalized in many states, is because whether or not the journey experience is pleasurable, it leads to an insight that enhances your life. And that's what the integration phase afterwards is all about. So yeah, it's that neural pathway is the old story we've been running, and this opens the aperture for new neural pathways to be formed and new ways of being to be accessed and chosen, like a menu that gets opened up and says, how would you actually like to see yourself or your life or what's possible?
Ah, fascinating.
Yeah.
It sounds like really, you sound very passionate about it, and that you feel very strongly about the power of how it works and that it works. And I hope that it it's a modality that you are able to successfully do for many people.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
Anybody who's
welcome.
interested in that, you can go to magicfacilitation.com.
All right, and all of this will be in the show notes.
Awesome.
All the ways to reach Molly will be in the show notes. All right, so as we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like listeners to know?
Yeah, the message that's coming to sort of share or end with on my end is try and hear that future self that's yelling back through time to you.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me emotional to think it, but whoever, they're calling you forward. They're begging you to choose. And they know how much greater life can get once you make that choice to change, to choose a different path, to
Yes.
get the fuck out of there if necessary.
Yes.
And it may be scary and it may be uncomfortable and there may be some rebuilding and lots of healing work to do. But on the other side of that, there's a life that you didn't imagine was possible for you.
Yes. And is well worth the work to get
Yeah,
there. I mean,
1,000 times yes.
yes, 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 yes. Having been someone who did that process, it's, I can't, I often cannot imagine what life would be like had I not gone through it all. And it's, it would be a lie to say it wasn't hard. And it would, obviously, you don't want people to have to go through the discomfort of the growth. And if I had to go back and do it again, I would have done it sooner,
Yeah.
because life is so much better. And if I had listened to my future self, right, I would have, to think that though the opportunities that stand before me now, right, would have just seemed impossible at that time. So I think it's a beautiful way to really look at moving through that kind of transition or change in your life and embrace it and move towards it, knowing that your future self is pulling you towards it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
also just want to say, just because it's coming to me, it doesn't have to be that you're in a relationship with a narcissist to know that you deserve better.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or to, you don't, or along those lines, you don't have to be in a relationship with a narcissist to want better, to want to develop, to want to grow, to want to seek
Yeah.
a change in your life. I just made a career change into a totally different field in literally midlife. So
Yeah.
we can, I think that's one of the benefits of living a life of seeking, of growth, of change,
Curiosity.
is that
Yeah.
is that literally, regardless of the kinds of relationships that you're in currently, you seek to create the life that you want, and
Yeah.
you're always moving towards that, always asking the questions, and it's amazing journey to be able to do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you. So are you. It's
Thanks.
been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you
Thank
so,
you for
so
having
much
me.
for
Yeah.
joining us. And like I said, all of Molly's information will be in the show notes, so you can find her that way. And really, really appreciate you. You're just such an amazing human being, and I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thank you everyone for listening. Definitely go to Jill's website if you're curious. She can probably help you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon. As we wrap up, here's the thing. I've made every mistake. I've literally been there and done that. It's one step at a time, and you'll get there. There's hope. You've got this. If you're struggling in a relationship and wondering if it might be controlling, you're not alone. Download my free PDF at locatecoaching.com/free gift to help you find clarity and confidence. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.